Great. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. It's a great pleasure, and thanks to Shantiama and Sukin and Catherine DeRose for the opportunity to speak. I received one of the most compelling invitations I've had in my academic career, which was a 5-minute provocation, which I thought was beautiful, and so here you have it. I could have spoken about various aspects of my research at the limits or interdisciplinarity in various ways. But I chose to speak to this audience about something that's been occurring to me, which are perhaps underappreciated, unappreciated, unspoken commonalities between trends across the university, across academia, between close and distant readings in science and the humanities. Of course, close reading doesn't really need a definition. Close reading is reading, the reading we all grew up with. But I want to just point out that when we're doing reading, we're reading in a stream of time from a single object, from a single text, from a single stimulus, that there is a bandwidth, input-output, that limits this process, right? And that makes it characteristic and gives it, frankly, its magic. But as many of you know, the humanities have been, and this intimate connection to reading, have been challenged by other kinds of more modern methods of analysis. This, for example, is a work of Franke Moretti, a map of the conversational interactions among characters in Hamlet. And although it's not entirely independent, it's a distinct way of taking in information and acquiring it that doesn't restrict itself to the bandwidth of close reading, right? And this kind of scholarship, of course, is something that's made possible by digitization, digital humanities, and all sorts of methods of analysis. Unrealized to many in the humanities might be a similar challenge going on between traditional close reading in the sciences and revolutions in the sciences. This is two illustrations of cell signaling pathways of sonic hedgehog on the left and bone morphogenetic protein on the right. These are based on literally thousands of experimental papers done on model organisms and development. So up on the upper left, we see SHH. That's our little player here, Sonic. It binds to patched 1, which inhibits smoothened and causing a cascade of glee interactions toward the left. Glee enters the nucleus and binds to the DNA, upregulating or downregulating genes. And these kinds of knowledge are based on thousands of experiments, right, by thousands of people, right, at different places in time. This is an incredibly complicated diagram with lots of issues. I'm going to compare that experimental knowledge, or that method of experiment, to one that doesn't restrict itself to the same bandwidth. This is a data set acquired in my own lab by Jake Musser for his dissertation, and it's comparing genes within development of tissues, in this case feathers and scales. And we're interested in the fact that feathers are a novelty. They evolved in some complicated way from scales. We're interested in the relation between them. So this expresses a Venn diagram of thousands of genes that are transcribed differently in feather tissues from scales and where they are. So we have a circle for early epidermis and late epidermis and late dermis and early dermis of bird feathers, right? And you see that there are thousands, in some cases hundreds in each little cell, but adding up to thousands. This is an entire scoop of tissue being analyzed at once. Now, we can also broaden the bandwidth by asking things about different species. So here we have comparisons of alligators, crocodiles, and various feathers and scales. A really complicated diagram with 1,000 little horizontal lines in each row. And what that shows is basically that during the evolution of chicken scales and emu feathers and chicken feathers from the ancestral Archosaurian alligator scale, it turns out that the current feathers are a lot more similar in their gene expression to alligator scales. So alligator scales is the left-hand column, or the right-hand column, feathers in the middle, and you can see there are many more light-colored cells on the left two-thirds than on the right. These are the kinds of inferences that come with asking questions in an entirely different way. So I want to just mention that these different approaches to science, what I will analogize to close and distant readings, are shared across the discipline. Close readings involve focused observations, often controlled, analysis of singular, individualized objects at one place in time. Intellectual connections are incremental, often building over lifetimes or with armies of workers. Distant reading involves broad observations of analysis of large collections of objects. Inferences about difference arise as a result. Distant readings are revolutionizing the sciences in parallel with the humanities, and many challenges to digital humanities are shared across academia. For example, on West Campus, we have a new Systems Biology Institute, which is an institute of distant reading within biology. At the inauguration of the event, Dean of the graduate school, Tom Pollard, came and gave an introduction. Usually these kinds of things are, we'd like to thank all the people that came here, et cetera, et cetera. There's coffee outside, thank you to our speakers. Instead, Pollard gave a blistering critique of systems biology. He's a close reader and could not prevent himself from raising the challenge. So to those of you who are in the digital humanities who have seen blowback or difference between your work and other parts of the traditional academia, this is happening as well in the sciences, and I think it's something that could raise a new dimension to how we appreciate the role of computers, the role of technology, the role of digitization, and bandwidth in our analyses. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Schroeder. I'm a postdoctoral associate in the DH lab. I'd like to invite our second speaker, Anna Zayaruznaya, up to the stage. She's coming from the Department of Music, and today she will be speaking, giving a talk entitled Representing Fauvel, Beyond Digitization.
Okay, this is fine actually, because it makes my point for me. My point is that in the digital domain, we lose track of the physical size of objects, the physical proportions of objects. When I was a junior in undergrad, I was at Oxford for the year, and I was doing a tutorial that was a tutorial of music history, because I was doing a music major. And in an Oxford tutorial, you get this sort of one-on-one progression through history, and we were in the early 14th century. That's as far as we'd gotten. And I was given a call number for a book to take out of the library. It was a book that looked something like that. Whatever. Wider than that, obviously, everything's getting stretched here. And I opened the book. It was handed to me, and it turned out to be a book about a horse named Fauvel, whose name is an acronym for a whole bunch of vices: flattery, avarice, villainy, changefulness, envy, and laziness. And the story of Fauvel, who, by the way, is a yellow-haired horse, hence the color fauve from him, is that he, despite all his vile qualities, is getting petted by everybody, both temporal and, lay and clerical authorities are petting him, and he rises so high that he decides he wants to try to marry the goddess Fortune. Fortune won't have him. She gives him to Vainglory. He marries Vainglory. There's a big party. There's a tournament between the vices and the virtues. The virtues win, but in the meantime, Fauvel and his progeny are baptized in a fountain of shit, and the prayer ends with the book ends with a prayer that God intervene, else the garden of France will be polluted by Fauvel and his Fauvelandi. And my thought was basically, whoa, what is it about the early 14th century that makes them want to make a manuscript about this? And with music. Now, the way I interacted with that manuscript then was very different from the way that my students and I interact with it now. The way we interact with it now is through the digital portal of the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and here it is. floating between sets of arrows, which is how manuscripts and PDFs and all sorts of things float for us, right? The image of a page just there on our screen is so common that we don't think about it. But here I am with a copy of the book that I was handed in Oxford, okay? The thing that impressed me most about it was just how huge it is. It's the biggest book I'd ever been handed. And so my question about how would they make a manuscript, why would they make a manuscript about this, was a question about resources. That is, this is a one-to-one, this is how big this manuscript actually is, and I've since seen it in the flesh, literally. It's a parchment manuscript, and it's an impressive object. And of course, that kind of thing gets lost these days. Now, obviously, things are gained too. I can now look at Fauvel in color anytime I want, which I couldn't do 5 years ago without going to Paris, and then they wouldn't give it to me anyway half the time. But something is clearly lost. And among the many things that are lost, I'll just signal the issue of the page versus the opening as a unit of interaction. Okay, this is something that medievalists know about. And if you think about when you're opening a book, you're actually looking at two different pages. And in the case of the Roman de Fauvel, in this particular copy, that becomes very important because music is notated across the opening. So what you're seeing here is different voices for a song. So here, the first voice starts here and goes there. The second voice starts here, starts here and goes there. And then this is the third voice. Unless you're looking at both pages, you can't even sing it. But of course, in order to sing it, you'd have to know something about early 14th century music notation. In order to read Fauvel, you have to know something about medieval French and medieval Latin. And in order to understand its pictures, you have to be an art historian. The person who is ready to understand this object without mediation doesn't exist now, and probably didn't in the early 14th century because it was a collaborative effort. So just to give you a sense for how we scholars interact with these things now, here is a slide that works really well when PowerPoint is working. And basically what it tells you is that this piece is edited in one publication, this piece in another, the text is edited in another thing, and this little tiny piece of chant is edited in yet a third place. We have dissociated this object in order to make sense of it, and so one of the ways that the digital domain can help is to kind of put it back together. But is there a way to put it back together that still respects its physical dimensions, which are so important to the process of understanding and using it? Okay, so this story began in Oxford a long time ago. It continued 5 or so years ago at Princeton, where I was teaching, and I went to my colleague Rebecca Feebrink, who was also teaching at Princeton at the time. She's now at Goldsmiths in London, and she is an HCI person in music. So she works on making novel musical instruments, novel ways for musicians to interact with sound generating software and to create new sounds. She's also the author of Wekinator. I don't know if that's a code that's familiar to anybody, but it's a way to turn almost anything into a musical instrument. One of her students turned their pet snake into a musical instrument. So when I went to her, I brought the book. And I said, look at this. How can we make this digital without losing its thingness? And we decided to use a large multi-touch tabletop computer where we could have Fauvel at size. Now, 5 or 7 years ago, we paid like $12,000 for something that no longer works. And anyway, it's at Princeton, and we are both no longer there. But the DH Lab has gotten us a much nicer, bigger surface, so we're in the process of reprogramming. Now, what does our software do, or has done and will do again once we get it back up and running? Well, it allows us to look at the manuscript at size and also to have various kinds of controls to mediate our experience with it. The simplest but probably most effective thing we've done is to map out each folio in an XML file that basically says, this is a voice of a motet, this is lines X through Z of the poem, this is an image. And what that allows us to do is actually then use different XML files to say, can you show it to me in English? Obviously a really important thing if I want to teach with it. So here you can see, or would be able to see, this is actually overlaid text, right? You can see that's no longer handwriting. And you can say, I want to see it in Old French, I want to see it in English. So now we can look at Fauvel with a translation floating above, while still understanding where it sits on the page, because that is important. Because all sorts of multimedia connections are being made in this source. Fauvel is a very early, very important multimedia object. And here you can see a close-up of English text floating in a semi-transparent box above a zoomed in version of the page. We can still zoom. And then there's an image next to it. So you can start to see how this works. In multimedia, we also can look at editions of the music right next to the music itself. We can do search on images and text. And so basically, we're trying to think more broadly about how can we preserve some of the most important things that tend to get erased in the process of digitization, right? And insofar as digitization so often seems to be the end of some DH endeavors, how can we move beyond it in a way that actually respects the physicality and the particularity of the objects that we're digitizing? We wouldn't be the first people to gather around a book and talk about it and think about it together. Thank you.
Next, we have Agnete Lassen, who's the Associate Curator at the Yale Babylonian Collection, and also she's a lecturer in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations.
It's working. Okay, so yeah, I'm from the Babylonian Collection, and I want to talk about some different digitization initiatives we've had there. First, I actually want to not talk about 3 initiatives because I only have 5 minutes, so I don't have time to mention all of them. The first project we did with the imaging lab out at YPCH, and there's a video that Yale News created that you can find on YouTube and look it up, and this is the final result. It's a model of a tablet that's almost 4,000 years old that we printed out, and we're sharing it with teachers and museums across the world so that they can print out their own model of the Pythagorean tablet. The next thing that I'm not going to talk about is 3D printing, and I think Summer already talked about this. So she mentioned there's a little display just outside, and you can see printouts, 3D printouts in plastic of 2 pieces of destroyed architecture from Palmyra. That piece there is the Arc of Triumph. It was unveiled at Trafalgar Square in London. It's not actual size. It's some 60% of the real thing. And the pieces that we have out there are just around this size. So you really, you're not getting the full picture of what this architecture was, but it is a type of preserving it, something that's destroyed. So the other thing about this is these pieces came from Syria, and they were erected, this was erected in London. And a lot of the Syrian friends I had felt that this was, of course, nice that there was a global interest in their material, their cultural heritage. But they really didn't appreciate their cultural heritage so close to the British Museum, where they, many of their pieces reside today. And the third thing I'm not going to talk about is Babylonian cookbooks in augmented reality. It's a display in the Wereld Museum in Rotterdam that's on right now. So we have 3,800 years old cookbooks in the Babylonian collection, and they're too fragile to travel. So we had them 3D modeled, and they were printed in the Netherlands. And what you see here is sort of a data mapping. So they're recipes, and what you see to the left, this is the ingredients. You see them at the bottom that would go into the recipe there. And then you hear a voice who's speaking the recipe in Akkadian. And over there you see sort of data mapped on top of the Akkadian. You see the transliteration of the Akkadian text. All right, so what I am going to talk about is 2 other projects that we had ongoing in the Babylonian collection. So this illustration here is from an article from last year in the New York Times. It's about a project to use big data or data mining approaches to ancient texts to find out if the laws that govern our economy, if they apply to ancient economy as well, or if there is a fundamental difference between the capitalist economy and that of the ancient world. And the illustration that you see there is sort of very, Indiana Jones is standing in front of some ruins and he's looking at some algorithms. But if you look at the work that they're doing, there's not a lot of Indiana Jones about it. It's all algorithms and statistics and visualizations of data. So in a way, I sometimes feel that you get a little removed. I think that was also your point. You're sort of removed from the objects that you're studying or the people that you are working with as a historian. So I work with cylinder seals. And cylinder seals they're around 1 inch tall, not more than that. And they functioned in ancient Mesopotamia as signatures. And you roll them out on your documents that you write on clay. And here you see impressed in sculpey, elephant gray sculpey, which is what we use in the Babylonian collection, the images that were carved on this tiny little cylinder. I want to focus on just one seal, and this is what the original publication of that seal looked like. So it's a rollout of the object, and it was presented in black and white in 1934 here. And it was republished in 1996 with, I think, even less data. You see it up there, just a drawing. No color, not even the cuneiform text that was carved into the surface of the seal. Here you see an image of the seal and its rollout. So you see that you lose some information in this way of publishing your seals. So this is a visualization of the same seal, and it was created by Babylonian Collections imaging specialist Klaus Wagensonner, who is right there. And I am working on a research project to think about how the ancient craftsperson interacted with the stone, with the material, and how his choices of placement of images and text played in with the stones that the patterning of the stone of the object. And if we just go back to this, you see this is not something that I can use in my research at all. Whereas this is very useful visualization technique. I want to show you another seal. Here you see the imagery of the rollout of it, and here you see an HDR image of the seal. And I want to show this to you because, to me, the visualization, the image, almost becomes an artwork in itself. So it stops being just like a research object, but it becomes an artwork that you can appreciate just for the beauty of it. All right, so the other project that I want to highlight is teaching in virtual reality. And I hope that you will all go out and try the headset at the poster presentation after this to visit the throne room in an Assyrian palace from the 9th century BCE. So as Summer also showed, this is one of these places that was bombed by ISIS. And they took great care in really destroying every single relief that was originally in this palace. Actually, a lot of what you saw, also the images that you saw from Nineveh that you showed before, that was a reconstruction. That wasn't the original. That was a Saddam-era reconstruction of the architecture. Most of the Nimrud Palace was dismantled in the mid-1800s by European powers who came in, and here is part of the relief right here. We have, including this, we have 7 pieces from the palace in Nimrud, and here you see where just one of the rooms is spread across 3 continents. So a team has been working since the 80s on finding out where are these pieces of reliefs in the world, and then reassembling it into one program, into one model. To reassembling it into one model. And we have here at Yale this virtual reality model where you can yourself go into this virtual space and look at the reliefs as they were before the palace was torn apart in the 19th century, and see how they appear in their original setting. You can go to the art gallery and see 2 of these reliefs on display and observe what they look like in a museum setting, completely removed from any of their original context, but how they are understood in a museum space. And then you can visit this virtual reality model afterwards and see how they form part of a very large and expansive narrative image program that was designed and thought up in the 9th century BC. All right, so I hope you'll go and try the virtual reality model. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Peter Leonard, the director of the Digital Humanities Lab. His talk today is titled Machine Vision in the Archive, Neural Networks and Visual Similarity.
Thanks very much, John. So what I'm going to show you guys today is a kind of response to a provocation that was given to me by actually Amy Hungerford and some other folks at Yale who work in the space of, or who are interested in the problem of what we might call visual culture computation. So what do I mean by visual culture computation? Well, my own background is in text mining, so my own experience is dealing with Unicode text. But here at Yale, we have an amazing amount of information in our museums, in our art galleries, in our special collections, in the Beinecke and Haas Art special collections, all over campus, in the Babylonian collection, which will never be reducible down to text. They are always going to exist in the visual or the pictorial realm. And so one of the questions we've been asking ourselves at Yale is, are there any interesting data mining techniques, any interesting machine learning techniques that might help us get affordances, get handles onto the amazing amount of culture held at Yale in the visual domain? And so what I want to do today is talk very quickly just about a demonstration interface. The interface we've built is on top of a collection of 19th century photography, which was recently acquired by the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. That collection is in the process of being digitized at a very high quality level. What I'm going to show you today is just about 27,000 images at a very small quality level that I think I can make a point with. So what I want to do is, before I show you these images, I'll bring up the website right now. But what I want to do first is just talk about what we're interested in doing. So obviously when we have a whole bunch of images, let's just say perhaps for this argument's sake about 27,000 images from the 19th century, what we could do is we could build an interface that has a back button and a next button. And you would hit that back button, and you only have to hit it about 26,999 times until you reach the end of the archive. And that'll work really well. Your finger might get tired. The other thing you might be able to do is you might be able to search for words like boxer or opera singer or stereogram or something like that. And if the metadata that we have, or if the metadata that we create through our cataloging team is good enough, then you'll be able to find all the pictures of boxers or all the pictures of Confederate generals. But the problem would be, what happens if we aren't sure that our metadata will ever be fully descriptive of what's on the screen here? So every time I'm reloading, I'm just showing you a couple different samples from a 27,000 strong image collection from the 1860s to the 1890s. We could hope that somebody's going to label this guy, you know, half naked, boxer, but actually maybe they'll label it pugilist, because that's actually what would have been called back then. So the problem is, how am I going to be able to find all of these images in the archive? And instead of searching, or instead of hitting the back button and the next button 26,999 times, what would be really exciting to us is if we were just able to move our mouse over a particular image and have all images that are visually similar to this image appear. So this would be true not only of this guy, but also of that guy, and this guy sitting at an angle. Maybe even bridges would come up. So let me reload these a couple more. If we're interested in women with really ornate hairstyles, we're interested in intent men with beards, women in white staring off in the distance, nature. So how are we doing this? Every time I'm moving my mouse over the image, what we're basically doing is asking for the photos in this collection, which are the most visually similar to the image that we're looking at here. And the way we're getting this metric of visual similarity is we're actually using an artificial neural network. We're using a pre-trained neural network that is designed for a modern problem, which is captioning pictures that you take with your smartphone. But behind the scenes, what we can do is use this neural network as a kind of artificial vision, a high-dimensional representation of thousands upon thousands of different ways of seeing. It's not too important for us to understand how the neural network works, because the internals of it are somewhat opaque, even to computer scientists. What is important for us to understand is that the neural network sees in about 2,048 dimensions. What we can then do is ask an algorithm to find the approximate nearest neighbors of all the 27,000 pictures in this 2,048 dimensional space. That's a lot of math for a human. It's not a lot of math for an algorithm. So what we can do is basically say, in this 2,048 dimensional space, what are the pictures which are nearest to this picture of Teresa Liebe? Or what are the pictures that are nearest to this gentleman right here? There's another thing we can do. We can take this 2,048 dimensional space that captures about 2,048 different ways of seeing. What we can do is use a dimensionality reduction on this high dimensional space, because it's very difficult for us to draw or visualize anything in more than 2 dimensions. Now here we have 2,048. But we can collapse those dimensions using a sort of a dimensionality reduction. In this case, it's Tisney. And what this will do is it'll allow us to visualize all these pictures on a screen which only has X and Y. So let me show you what a dimensionality reduction of a 2,048 dimensional space looks like with some of the images from this 19th century collection. Over here you can see that a lot of our stereograms are in the lower left-hand corner because they share certain visual characteristics. They're doubled, they often have a yellow or a red frame. Over here I think there are actually some portraits of Native Americans who are all clustered in the same 2-dimensional space. And then, intriguingly, for those students of the 19th century, the battlefield dead at Antietam are clustered over here because they share the same characteristics, really, of many blades of grass and bodies aligned horizontally. What's interesting about this visualization is that its space is globally meaningless but locally meaningful. There's no significance to the fact that the Antietam pictures show up on the top, in the middle left, and the stereograms show up on the bottom left. But what is meaningful are the local arrangements of images. So here we have a whole bunch of Second Empire buildings taken at 45-degree angles, probably in New York City. Over here you have various other images that all cohere. Here's probably images of the same building that are taken. And so what we're asking us to do is to think about this 2-dimensional space as an arbitrary but still diagnostically meaningful compression or reduction of this high-dimensional visual space. And this technique, together with this other technique here, can be, I think, a useful way of making sense of a collection which is eventually going to grow to 80,000 images, saving all of our mouse buttons the task of hitting that button to the next image 80,000 times. Thanks very much.
Our last panelist is Larry Weiland, who's a senior research scientist in the School of Engineering and Applied Science and a design mentor at the Yale Center for Engineering Innovation and Design. His talk is titled Examples of Steam in the Seed, Mathematics of Soap Bubbles, Physics of Chocolate, and the Artful Engineering of Music.
Thank you. So in the Center for Engineering Innovation and Design, we have lectures and workshops that are specifically designed to sort of bring together people and sort of topics from different areas, combining very intentionally science, technology, engineering, mathematics with the arts. And what I'm going to do is just sort of show you some examples and highlight some of the student work that I think kind of speaks for itself, and showing how, by bringing these together, it provides an incredibly enriching experience. Along the way, I'll kind of also mention various digital techniques that are used throughout in what I would say are somewhat unique ways. I've actually brought a bunch of sort of demonstrations. I may not have time to show all of them to you, but I can have some of them available later on if people want to come up and look at them. So I'm just going to start off with a video, one of the students. Hopefully this will work.
tons of crazy things just to sound like different than everyone else. So what the process is, you can record an audio file, like a string, doing some crazy things, or coins crashing, or plates smashing, whatever, and you record it. And then you can assign it to a MIDI keyboard, which is basically just a small keyboard that hooks up to a computer.
So this was just an excerpt from our final presentations in a course that I co-teach with Konrad Kazmarek from the Department of Music. The course is called Musical Acoustics and Instrument Design, and in this course we teach the students initially a lot about the acoustics of music and you know, waves on strings, waves in solids, all the sort of math and physics behind acoustic instruments, and then Konrad kind of takes over and talks about digital music and digital music synthesis techniques. And in the last part of the course, the students get to build whatever kind of instrument they can conceive of. I think the interesting thing here was, is if you caught it, and it went by pretty fast, but Jordan was an American Studies major, but in the summers he goes to LA and he writes music for television and movies, successfully as far as I understand. So, you know, he came from a completely different background. He got thrown into this course where we were teaching him about all the physics and engineering, giving the students the engineering tools like CAD and 3D printing and laser cutting, you know, all these tools to build things, and then we sort of set them loose. So I'm just going to point out something interesting. I can later maybe show a video of him playing this instrument, but I'll bring up my PowerPoint. So this instrument was essentially an organ constructed of beverage bottles. I won't say what kind. Uh-oh, I don't think I see all of my pictures here. So, but I can, because I brought a bunch of items, I can sort of just demonstrate this. So Jordan had to figure out how to play notes across a bottle, like many people do, but he wanted to create an instrument out of this. So he had to sort of automate the process. The picture I had is him holding the bottle and producing the note and taking selfies of himself. And then he took the outline of his lips, which he had to digitize into a curve. And then he, in order to get the note to play across the bottle with a stream of air that was not somebody blowing, but was actually a pump that could produce the air stream, he took that shape, and then in CAD he sort of, you know, made it sort of continuously led to a round shape that you could put on a tube. And so by doing that, he could produce something that would make the right sound. And then he constructed a whole instrument out of that, which you saw, where he could play, you know, direct the air across different bottles. So, so that was just an example of sort of using some digital techniques, combining them with his musical background, but, you know, using all of his engineering and science expertise that he got in his class. So I only, in fact, don't seem to have all my pictures here, but I have all the demos, so I think I'll just sort of describe them and show them to you, which might be more interesting anyway. I will just quickly mention soap bubbles as something that I will be prepared to show afterwards if anybody's interested. It might seem like sort of a, you know, childish sort of thing to be talking about, but we do a workshop in the CEID on soap bubbles where we use particular soap bubble demos to solve mathematical problems. So you can solve all sorts of minimization problems using soap bubbles, and I have some of those here. It's sort of ironic that in order to demonstrate that, I cannot use anything digital. I have to use an old-style overhead projector, which I have down there, which will always turn on and work. So I can show some of those later, but let me just kind of bring out things I brought and describe them. So this is a musical instrument that was designed by Prum, not going to get his last night game, right? A tray there, or a pool. And he, I believe, plays the viola, but he wanted to make it cello. So, you know, a combination of using laser cutting the body and measuring the position along the string produces a note as long as you are using this bow across this motor down here. So if you're turning the motor, the speed at which you turn the motor corresponds to the volume, and then wherever you push on the string corresponds to the note. However, he couldn't stop there, so he also put an accelerometer into the bow so that when you tilt it in different directions, it shifts the note to correspond to playing different strings. Here, where you would normally be tuning your strings, this whole thing is controlled by a microprocessor. He has a way where you can change the tuning system, so you can tune it to any bass note you would like, but you can also discretize the notes along the string. So if you can't really play the cello like I can't, and you discretize it, then I can very easily play this device because I can find the notes quite easily, whereas I can't find them if they're continuous. So, you know, this was an example. Prum was a freshman, actually, when he built this. And again, when he came into this class, he actually was, you know, initially thought he was more interested in studying just music. And now he's decided that he could actually do all the things that he'd like to do musically by majoring in electrical engineering and computer science. So, you know, one of the things that happens in these courses is that the students, you know, they kind of just see different directions and different ways of looking at what they're doing. And even, or just as importantly, there's other students in the class that they're interacting with that, you know, they learn so much from. So these classes typically have some music majors and some engineering majors, but then people from a lot of other disciplines, like the American Studies major, I showed you Jordan. I had a student, Hans Wilger. I think I can just finish with the video of that and then leave the other demos for later. Hans came into the class because he was interested in acoustics by way of bird calls and understanding things about evolutionary biology and bird calls and the acoustics of bird calls. So he thought, well, let me take this class. He eventually ended up making an oud. So you'll see him playing this this instrument, and it was built, except for the tuning pegs, completely built in the CEID using a lot of digital tools, such as, you know, computer and numerical controlled milling machines and laser cutting, etc. So, I don't know, that's pretty incredible. He came in and just made that in about 3 weeks, I would say, and you can only make an instrument like that in such a short time if you take advantage of all the digital tools that we have to offer. Normally something like that would be handcrafted. It might be a better instrument, I don't know, but by using these tools, you can make something that you design in your head very quickly, and I think he plays it extremely well. I don't know what my time is like, but I could show one more demonstration if I have another. Yeah, so I'll just finish up with one more example. I don't know if I'll be able to get sound. I have to couple to your Bluetooth. I don't know if that's going to work or not. But this was sort of an interesting one. A student, David Torres, who came into the class as a computing in the arts major. And he was interested in creating an instrument that was based on this idea of formants. And formants are sort of the cavities between your vocal cords and your mouth and your throat that allow you to produce speech sounds, like vowel sounds, for example. So there's a musical program called Max where you can kind of put in all sorts of filters and you can replicate all these various cavities by way of these spectral filters. In the end, after kind of thinking about all the things that we did in the first part of the class, and this is sort of an example of somebody going from digital back to analog, so it's a little bit ironic, but what he did is he built a bunch of sort of analog filters that essentially, using 3D printing technology, that essentially produced those same filter functions. And so this instrument became sort of an analog instrument, and the digital side was sort of more on the music composition side. So he sort of, again, sort of shifted the way he was looking at the problem by understanding, that you could reproduce the basic physics of filters by actually making a physical filter that was something like what is in the real system. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think I'm done.
Thank you everyone for your talks. I'm just going to quickly introduce you again in case anyone came in late. We have Agnete Lassen, Peter Leonard, Anna Zayaruznaya, we have Richard Prum, and we have Larry Weiland. And then the first question I would like to ask is, how did you venture outside of your field to work in the intersection of arts and sciences?
Right, so I think that the visualization, the images of the seals that Klaus so kindly produced, I think that was, it was not an intentional effort, but it was just seeing those images. The aesthetics of them were so, I don't know, so powerful to me that Klaus and I were talking about doing an exhibition just with the images, without any sort of, just letting the images speak for themselves.
I guess for myself, my undergraduate degree is in art history and my doctorate is in European literature, but I feel like there's so much cultural heritage material being digitized nowadays by institutions such as Yale and by for-profit corporations such as Google, that there's a kind of moral imperative to apply the data mining and machine learning that's coming out of places like Silicon Valley in order to ensure that humanists remain in charge of the manipulation and the comprehension of all this material.
I don't really feel that I've ventured in the sense that I'm collaborating, but also that the multimedia is not, the domain of the sciences exclusively. So I think that as, I'm a literate user of technology, or whatever the adjective would be. I'm a competent user, and so I'm thinking about, just what are the various timely tools at my disposal to answer the questions that I'm answering from within my discipline, but also thinking about pedagogy and access.
Yeah, I presented a few slides that showed the challenges of big data and communicating about it in science, and I think they're parallel. We have to invent new tools, and we're inventing new graphical tools to communicate data. But one of the other challenges I'm doing in my lab is to try to visualize what birds look like to birds. We're all colorblind with respect to birds. Birds see in the UV, which is beyond blue, but because they have 4 color receptors, it's more than just beyond blue. It's actually an additional dimension to color. So they see all kinds of colors we can't imagine, like ultraviolet yellow, which is a special kind of purple that is as different. It's as different from yellow as purple is from red. And birds use these in their daily lives. So It's a huge digital challenge, but also a computational graphical challenge. There aren't cures for color blindness, so we can't actually experience what birds see, but we can study the hell out of it using these kind of new tools. So, and visualization is a big part of it.
For me, really, you know, what's that?
You should use it.
Okay.
No, you should use it.
Is it on? Okay, that one's not on. Yeah, for me, you know, sort of venturing into this collaboration, you know, came out of some of my natural interest in music to begin with. I had already taught acoustics, you know, as sort of a physics course, but really it just came out of finding the perfect kind of person to collaborate with. So I can't say enough about Conrad, who I work with. And so it's just the right combination of the kind of physics and engineering that we're already doing in the CEID with the sort of digital techniques that he's an expert in. And so it came out of a conversation, and you know, I think the great thing is that we, with no hesitation whatsoever from either of the departments, we were given the go-ahead to start to, you know, move forward with that class. So it was great.
So we'd like to now open up questions to the audience.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your talks, which were fascinating and very diverse. Is this on? I was very kind of touched and humbled by how many of them touched on pedagogy and on teaching, and also just interested in this question of means versus ends. So some digital humanities projects leading to a product that is then imported into the classroom, and in some cases, the creation of the final platform, that process being a pedagogical moment as well, especially in some of the talks. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. Is that something you've thought about, and how that's worked itself out in all of your projects?
If I may say something about that. So for us, it's teaching it's a lot about recreating a context or creating a space that we can't visit, either because we would never go to a place, or because it's been destroyed, or because our objects are very fragile. So we want to have that teaching to things experience, but we don't want our objects to be destroyed because of handling. So using digitization, different types of digitization techniques makes it possible to use objects in the classroom without compromising the actual objects. I think it's also a question of sharing this. You know, you get it in a form, in a digitized form, where you can share it with your colleagues across the world, and also with the people who, you know, we have a responsibility as a cultural heritage institution in the Babylonian collection that everything that we have come from a place where there's a lot of destruction of cultural heritage, and we want to provide them with access to the objects, and also with scholarly tools that they might not have. So expensive books, and they can't even pay for their JSTOR account. So for us, that's digitization that's an end for our digitization goals.
I mean, I think, of course, the answer to process or product is yes, right? But so with the digital Fauvel, it was originally programmed by undergraduate programmers, because that was the nature of the grant we had from Princeton. And it was a really wonderful experience, because the programmers found themselves asking really kind of ontological questions about the nature of the material they were encoding, right? The minute you have pieces of music that have multiple voices, what's the best way to represent that object digitally? Are these voices part of the same thing? So should there be a sort of superordinate thing that they belong to? And pretty quickly you're asking actually very meaningful questions about what is the nature of song, right? But I think that it's very important as a researcher sort of in charge of one of these projects to keep your own questions there, because it seems like sometimes the building of the tool ends up being the end in itself, and I'm trying to really keep what are my sort of most personal questions for this manuscript, and to try to create a tool that ultimately helps me answer them, because otherwise I think we lose interest.
Other questions?
each represent a department. Can you imagine 20, 30 years from now, will the departments you're in be history and you would be organized creating a group of studies that would be differently cataloged? Are we in the middle of some sort of earthquake change here?
I'm in ecology and evolutionary biology, and right now I have collaborations in chemistry, economics, mechanical and chemical engineering, applied physics, all around the university. So I am as spread out as you can get. But I dearly hope that in 200 years there will be a department with a certain mission in ecology and evolutionary biology. I'm also a member of the bird department, the ornithology department, division of the Peabody Museum. And part of the reason why they hired me was because they have 150,000 birds in the collection. That institution and its durability, that department and its lastingness, defined in that way by the material objects, the birds, contributes to the discipline itself. So I love the interconnections, but the core missions are also essential to the university.
I sincerely hope that the music department will still be here in 20 years. I think interdisciplinarity is predicated on disciplinarity. I think we all still need to be experts in something so that our collaborations are strong collaborations. And if you imagine, say, music, and right, I speak as somebody who I study 14th century music, right? That's deep, deep humanities, right? But if you take the music department out of it, or take people who study music primarily out of it, yes, there will be music in tons of other departments, but nobody will have that commitment to music, and things will be lost. Already the notation I study, in terms of people who know how to read it, that number has gotten very small. And we're doing something to raise that literacy back up because we need to keep various kinds of knowledge in play. So my answer is yes or no. I can't remember how it was framed. I hope so.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think it might be a good idea to close here because we're way out of time. I'd like to invite Susan Gibbons up to deliver her closing remarks. But could please everyone give a hand to all of the panelists today.
All right, I recognize that we are running over time, and there's going to be a wonderful poster session next. So I want to make sure I give you the time for that. So I'll keep my remarks very, very short. I hope you experienced today what the title is of this conference, which is Beyond Boundaries. And as we've been talking about all afternoon, what we heard about and what we saw is how the different disciplines can be working together, and that those disciplinary boundaries, while the disciplines are still vitally important, there's collaboration that's possible. And what we hope is that a conference like this, or spending time in the Digital Humanities Lab, which is here in Sterling Library, provides you with that opportunity to collaborate and realize the methodologies that you can bring from different disciplines together, the technology, as well as the humanistic questions that can be meshed together to really explore different ideas. So I hope you'll follow up with us. If you're excited by some of the things you saw today, to visit us in the Digital Humanities Lab, to participate in Yale STEAM, the Center for Teaching and Learning, there's lots of ways where we can carry on this conversation. Before we go, I want to make sure that we thank a couple people. Kathy DeRosa, I know, put a tremendous effort into this event today, and so I want to have a round of applause for her. I also want to say thank you for putting up with this space. I know it's a challenging room, and starting next month, it will be completely renovated. So if we have this conference next year, this will still be a lecture hall, but it will have comfortable seating, better acoustics, and different technology. So hang in there with us as we renovate that. And then the last piece is that the evolution of our own work here in the Digital Humanities Lab, that starting this December, we'll be engaging in a renovation project of the Franke Family Periodical Reading Room, and that will become the future home of the DH Lab. So a much larger space on the main floor of the library, and we hope to open this up next summer. That project is made possible through the generosity of two. The Goizueta Foundation, that has been supporting the DH Lab's activities of the last 3 years, and also Rich and Barbara Franke, who are here with us today, who have also probably the first to say, I'll renovate a room not once, but twice, to make sure it's aligned with the purposes of this university. So if you join me in thanking them as well.